Yeah, have a seat. I know, no one wants to sit there.
You did it shorter than
So we already start the recording of our brown bag. Today is our guest is Jeff Soule. He is the director of outreach and international chapter of American Planning Association. He is now currently in Washington, D.C. He worked for New York, providing technical assistance to 39 towns and 14 villages in a four-county region. He is policy coordinator for U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C., where he directed 3 years program of revitalization. He participated and hosted several international professional exchanges, including programs sponsored by the United Kingdom, United States. In 1997, he launched an initiative with Chinese government to provide long-term technical assistance through exchange and special projects. Also, he has served as advisor to the United Nations Development Program, where he prepared reports on long-term recommendations on environmental and administrative issues. In 2007, he became the director of outreach and international program at APA, the first such position to combine communication, partnership, and international activities. Also, Jeff led recovery effort in the Gulf Coast after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, and developed a variety of programs and training events to assist the region's recovery. He has lectured at Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Cornell, Syracuse, and internationally at Cambridge, Imperial College, University of Montreal, National University of Singapore, Hong Kong University, and Beijing University. Oh, he said he can see us. He said he can see us, but he cannot see. He can see us, but he cannot hear us. No, he can see and hear, but maybe he cannot talk. I don't.
Are you on mute, Colin?
No.
Maybe he's on mute. Not to insinuate he said it.
He said, I can see you, but you cannot hear me. Okay, great. We can hear you, but we can see only your pic. Oh, yeah! Morning, great.
Yeah, I don't know what you. I kept clicking at it. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. I kept trying to find something to click, and then whatever Gala did, I'll try to ignore the. I'll try to ignore. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about the APA international program, and second, how to role in international development. Working okay?
Yes, international development and international division.
So and then I'm going to talk about trends that I've seen over the last 20 years in international development. Basically, what we're doing is APAs, we're trying to reach out to our members internationally. Right now we have about 100 APA members that are scattered in 85 countries around the world. Most of them are in, of course, but we also have a lot in Asia, Southeast Asia, and China. A good number in Africa, a growing area of interest. Try to serve the members' needs internationally. Second thing that we do is we focus on education, primarily training. Years ago, I started the China program, and that was based on Now, the first few years, we tried a whole bunch of different things, including training planners, doing seminars for them, and bring them over here, getting planners over there for line assistant around. Over the first few years, we kind of settled in on mayors. We discovered that the mayors were the ones who were actually making the decisions. So, and focusing on the planners so much, we started something called the Mayor's Training Program, which brings 20 to 25 mayors over to the U.S. for a week boot camp, kind of not to make them into planners, but to show them good, the bad, and the ugly of U.S. planning experience over the years. So them to Chicago and Washington, because that's where we have offices, but we also take them around different places in the country. Sometimes we take them to the small cities. In Texas, we take them to what's called Texas Triangle, which is Austin, Houston, and San Antonio, because we have a good rapport with the cities and the planners there. So in the 3 weeks that they're here, they get to see kind of like mistakes that we've made, like with urban renewal and looking at urban sprawl and how that's morphing into trying to retrofit the suburbs into a more urban really kind of a place. So we talk a lot about governance. They're very interested in we manage the function, how we have the planning commission idea, nonprofit organizations, and so on. So a little bit about how planning integrates within the different governance models that we have. I have a hard time explaining to them that we have so many different states, and every city has its own style and own administering. And so it's kind of like a laboratory. It's China where we find the same bureaus at every level, whether it's the national level, the provincial level, or the state level, so for the local level. A little messier. Better?
Wait, I will mute here.
You're on Car Talk.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
Yay.
Yeah, that's better because now I can't hear the echo. So I'll just go back to what I was talking about as sort of APA's overall international program. Let me try putting on speaker to see if that works. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's easier. It's like I don't look like I'm an operator, so. So we started the Senate program as an experiment in different ways that we could provide technical assistance internationally, and so we tried a variety of things. And we had a group of mayors back in 2000, and so that was the first time that we kind of had the epiphany that mayors should be our target for training as opposed to planners. There are about 37,000 planners, by the way, in China, and at any given moment there are somewhere between 800 and 1,000 Chinese graduate students in American planning schools. So we have a huge number of their peer group who are getting their master's in the U.S. and some of them want to stay here, but I would say probably 2/3 of them want to go back and work in China. So it's kind of interesting to talk to them and see what they're up to. But the other thing that we started doing also was to participate more in kind of global activities, such as Habitat, UN Habitat's World Urban Forums, the Habitat 3, which is coming up, looking at the UN Development Program, looking at
ECOMOS and ISOCARP and all those different organizations that exist to kind of promote planning internationally. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Habitat 3 because that's coming up next year, and there may be an opportunity for your university and others to send teams, or you can kind of see what the faculty is up to. It's going to be in Quito, so it's not exactly far, but it's not that far compared to like if it was in Singapore or Australia or something like that. It is in the Western Hemisphere, and that'll be the first time that it's been in the Western Hemisphere. This is only the third one, so that's an opportunity for us. So we've participated more in those kinds of international programs. And the third thing that we've done is we've tried to expand our international membership. As I mentioned, we have members in 85 different countries. So that's a little bit of an overview of APA's broad international program. And that kind of it in terms of staff. We do have a part-time staff person based in Hangzhou, China at Zhejiang University, who works as our representative in China. And I have a number of interns that come in and out of the program. So usually we haven't had a direct relationship with your university, but we have had with Virginia Tech, which is close by. Also University of Virginia. So we just by the geography, we have probably here in Washington, we have more connections with those two sort of local universities. There are also other universities that I'll mention. I'm not sure what kind of program you have internationally, but MIT, for example, has had a long-standing program to provide technical assistance to international governments going back to the 60s. It's called the SPURS program. Berkeley has one as well. So there's some schools that have developed an integrated international component to their planning curriculum. So at some point, if we wanted to talk about that in specific with some of the faculty members, I'd be happy to bore down on that. But today, I'm just trying to give you an overview of ideas that we can talk about further in more detail. Also, have you met Monica Grow?
No.
Monica is my counterpart in what we're calling our Emerging Professionals program. The Emerging Professionals include students as well as kind of professionals that are just getting started, just getting out of school, getting into the planning field. We've tried to develop a program that spends more time worrying about how we can better serve students and young professionals. And Monica's in charge of that, so she is a good resource, and I'll be happy to pass along the conversation that we're having today. If you have any questions I can't answer, she can probably answer. There's going to be a big number of students at the Phoenix conference, of course, and Phoenix is not too terribly far from Kansas, not as far as Seattle, for example. So we always encourage students to participate in that. So that's a little bit more about APA and what we're up to now. In terms of how many of you are interested in maybe thinking about some kind of international career component? Everybody? Okay. Well, there are basically three kinds of ways that I've seen people get involved in international planning. One is the most obvious is with consulting firms. In the international consulting market has been growing faster than the domestic job market. So places like HOK or AECOM and so on have been not only kind of acquiring other smaller planning firms, but they've been hiring quite a lot of people. So if you have the skills that they look for generally tend to be planning, of course, but also experience with other cultures and also language skills are important, but they're not absolutely critical. So most planning is to be conducted in English these days, so that's kind of a good thing. But language skills certainly don't hurt. The second area is in nonprofits. There are a number of organizations like Habitat for Humanity, for example, that are global. There are a number of environmental organizations, the Natural Resources Defense Council in our DC has a Beijing office. They have an Eastern European presence, for example, and some. Then there's Embark, which focuses mostly on Latin America. So the NGOs are playing a larger role in kind of specific areas, especially transportation and land use connection, looking at social equity issues, looking at poverty reduction as it relates to urban development, and the environment continues to be a big issue, along with some of the trends I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, such as resilience and climate change. So those are all those are the kinds of topics that foreign governments are looking for assistance on, both at the national level as well as at the local level. And the third area is actually in academia. There are exchange programs, both short-term exchange programs. There are fellowships. Of course, everybody knows about Fulbright, but there are a lot of other ones besides Fulbright that send young professionals over to do work on short-term projects, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, sometimes a year, through different academic programs that you can apply for after you graduate. If you want to do of course, if the campus has a semester abroad program, that's always useful, or you could even think about maybe starting your own. I remember I went to graduate school right after the Ice Age, and there weren't a lot of formalized programs, but I kind of made up one myself, and I got a professor to put together. I got my master's in planning, but I was always very interested in landscape architecture, so I took a lot of courses in landscape architecture. I convinced one of my professors to create a summer semester in England to study, quote unquote, the English gardens, which I thought would be kind of fun. And that got approved by the faculty. So now but back then there weren't, like I said, there weren't a lot of formal programs like there are today, but you can always probably make up your own and get credit for it too, if you take the initiative. Excuse me. So then, those are some of the opportunities I see out there. I think that, our APA surveys show that most of the students, about 80% of the current planning students who are members of APA, expect to have some point in their career where they will be working on international issues. So that's good news for us, because we think that that's a big market, and that's what seems to be motivating a lot of people working, whether it's on everything from climate change to social equity to governance systems. There's a big opportunity out there. The key is to find one or two avenues, and then just get your feet wet and meet some people. I have a colleague here at APA who was working with us part-time. Her name was Jen Grace, and Jen was a graduate student at Columbia, and she got an opportunity was sponsored by Volvo, for example, to go over and work in Kenya on urban transportation issues initially, but it turned into more of an environmental cleanup and neighborhood revitalization effort. And from Volvo's standpoint, that was fine, because they basically wanted to have a presence in problem solving, and even though they were the sponsor, it wasn't directly linked to selling automobiles in this case. So they're have to keep your eyes and ears open for opportunities like that. So now the third thing I want to talk about is trends, and I've already mentioned a couple of them, but I think the biggest thing is climate change. I know U.S. politics makes it hard to talk about climate change directly these days, but everybody else in the globe is talking about it and actually coming up with programs. There's a UN Habitat actually has a small group of people, professionals who have been working on guidelines for climate action plans. And I've been on the working group representing APA, and I think it's come out pretty well. I can't send it to you because it's going to be opened. I mean, the grand unveiling of the climate action plan guidelines is going to be next week in Paris at COP21, which is I have a couple of members in Europe that are participating on our behalf. I go to some of these things, but we try also to carve out our participation to members who happen to be in the region or other organizations that we partner with. In this case, we partner with a group called ECOS, the International Council on Monuments and Sites, which is the International Historic Preservation nonprofit, primarily about the World Heritage Site designation. But my colleague there, the executive director of the U.S. ECOS committee, is going, and we actually collaborated on putting together a workshop on how cultural heritage is a key component of sustainability. And if you want to board out on that, there's a site that I kind of keep up to date. It's called Road to Habitat 3 in the APA website. Road to Habitat 3 has a link to a white paper that I collaborated with a couple of other authors on this issue of cultural sustainability. Cultural heritage is a component of sustainability. So you can read more about that. I think it's also a growing trend, nexus between traditional settlement patterns and sustainability, because one thing that the U.S. has done pretty well inadvertently is we've exported sprawl, and a lot of the problems that we see around the world, whether it's in India or China or Africa, wherever, you see the same kind of issues where development is leapfrogging out of traditional urban core, and it's not being, the infrastructure isn't necessarily driving it. It's more driven by short-term development pressures. And of course, we've seen that in the U.S. for decades. So it's unfortunate, but that's just reality. So one of the reasons I've been focusing on this issue of cultural heritage is because the traditional settlement patterns do a couple of things. They're compact, they reduce the need for energy, but they also create a better social environment, more socially cohesive environment where people, different incomes, different backgrounds mix, which is what cities were all about in the first place. So we have tried to promote this idea of looking at traditional settlement patterns, not from a nostalgic standpoint, but really as a way to map out how cities are going to grow and change and develop in the future. Here's a statistic for you. In the next 15 years, we're going to add 800 million urban residents just in Asia alone. So that's about one San Francisco a week that has to be built. So obviously that's a huge challenge, but if we don't use the land and the infrastructure wisely, it's going to be a disaster for everybody. So this message of looking at how we can learn from the longevity of traditional settlement patterns, I think is a really important one, and that's why we've been collaborating with ECOMOS and Habitat and others on this. The other thing that it does, in addition to the pattern, is it creates opportunities for traditional skills in construction and technology. For example, if you're living in Jamaica or any island in the Caribbean, and you're building things out of glass and steel, it means you're importing a lot of things. So one of the other things that we're looking at is how people use local materials and adapt it to the climate and the customs better than importing kind of international style architecture, both from an energy standpoint, but also from a cultural identity standpoint. So that's another reason why we're looking at how people around the world have used traditional building materials, traditional techniques. And moving back to that as a sort of along the parallel with the local food movement, where people are looking at being more in sync with the products and food that's grown locally as opposed to importing everything. No matter what season or time of year it is, we have to have bananas or oranges. So there's a lot of this effort, I think, that cuts across a variety of disciplines, which is really quite interesting, where you're looking at things from a sociological standpoint, from an economic development standpoint, and also from a physical development standpoint, that make where you are in your career is really exciting, because there are going to be such a demand with all that urbanization going on for technical expertise. In India, for example, we've just started working with India after trying for a number of years. We finally got a decent foot in the door. And I met with a bunch of the academic organizations in India, and I was shocked to find out that here's a country of 1.4 billion people, okay, that's urbanizing, not as rapidly as China, but it's still urbanizing rapidly. And how many graduate students in planning do you think there are in all of India? Yeah?
Thousands. Yeah.
One, you say one here.
Well, I can't hear you very well, so I don't know, the sound problem, we'll have to figure out how to work out in the future, but the answer is about 900.
We were close.
Only 900 in the whole country, so it's astonishing, and that's one of the reasons they're spending so much money in India, bringing in outside experts from France, from Japan, from Singapore, from all over the place, instead of growing their own home-based talent. So one of the things that we're going to try to work with the academic institutions in India on is beefing up their own academic offerings rather than trying to say, well, you just hire more foreign consultants. I don't think that's going to solve the problem. So that was kind of a surprise. Like I said, in China, that's not really a big problem. There's a lot of problems in China, but finding expertise they do have in good numbers. And so mentioned the relationship to cultural heritage and traditional settlement patterns is one of the trends. One of the other trends is resilience, which sort of connected to climate change, but not entirely. And resilience is a new phraseology for disaster mitigation. And I kind of like it because it broadens it out in terms of not just environmental resilience, but looking at economic resilience as well, and also cultural resistance to resilience to change. Because there's a lot of traditional cities and settlement patterns that are getting bombarded with kind of this idea of modernity. And modernity has its benefits, but it also has its challenges. And I think that a lot of times I see politicians from all over the world who are by necessity short-term thinking because they have to get reelected. And so there's this contradiction between drive for, trying to be contemporary without necessarily spending the time to analyze how we could combine the best aspects of modern urbanization with also some of the traditional cultural identity issues. There are mayors that get it. Of course, Juan Clos, who's the head of UN Habitat, was the mayor of Barcelona. Barcelona is world-renowned for its kind of unique characteristics in terms of balancing cultural identity with modern economic development. So the nexus between economic development and planning, I think, is another area that's very important for you to kind of look at as a skill set. So I talked about resilience, climate action plans, UN Habitat. I'm going to talk now about Habitat and then I'll quit so we can have some Q&A and I'll turn the speaker back on. The Habitat 3, as I mentioned, happens every 20 years, so it's kind of a rarity. It's the only time that people around the world get together to talk about human settlement and a collective action, and also to set some goals. What's different about Habitat 3 is that it has coincided with an effort to create Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. I'm going to get into a little bit of alphabet soup here, so you can find out more about all of these different critters on the Road to Habitat 3 website if you get lost. But the Sustainable Development Goals were kicked off originally in 1991 in Rio de Janeiro, known as the precursor to Agenda 21, which also has a lot of, in the United States, has political, images of black helicopters and people in helmets and taking out property rights. So that's a problem in the U.S. It's not so much a problem elsewhere in the world. Agenda 21 was a voluntary set of ideas to implement the Rio Accords. And then prior to 2000 was the second round of development goals called the Millennial Development Goals. Millennium Development Goals were implemented obviously in 2000 at the millennium. And now those have run out. And so happy circumstance is that the redo of the Millennium Development Goals coincides with Habitat 3. And this is not necessarily a planned thing, but everybody realizes it's an opportunity to tie the rethinking of what actually should we have as Sustainable Development Goals to the outcome of Habitat 3, which will be in Quito in October of 2016. I've been working a lot with my colleagues at APA to influence Sustainable Development Goals and align them with our own Sustaining Places program. There's a PAS report. If you get, I'm sure that your library has our PAS reports. On the Sustaining Places guidelines has a whole set of things. Basically, we ask the question, what does the comprehensive plan of 2020 look like, and how should it be evaluated? So we got all the best and brightest people we could think of and came up with a set of guidelines. So I've been using that to kind of marry this idea of the global sustainable development goals with our own idea of where the comprehensive plan should be going. That's worked out fairly well. The problem is getting to the metrics of how to measure these sustainable development goals. And that food fight isn't over yet. That has to come to an end by March of 2016 so that it can be incorporated into the lead up to Quito. But right now we have about 270 metrics Okay, well, that's a lot to put on the plate of a mayor or a planning director or whoever's going to be doing all this. So we're in the process now of trying to whittle down or see if there are indicative indicators. I guess that's an oxymoron, indicative indicators, that can substitute for others that, sort of like the canary in the coal mine idea, where if you can measure sidewalks, can you get into, other kinds of aspects of walkability, for example. So that's the discussion that we're having right now, is how to measure how countries and cities can measure their progress, because we don't just have sustainable development goals that don't mean anything. This is a mistake that we made in past habitats, having a lot of really lovely florid language about how cell phone paths are important, but we hadn't gotten down to the details. So Habitat 3, much more focused on being practical. Anyway, so that's, I've gone on too long already, but anyway, it's a lot to talk about. But let's see if there's some questions. I'm going to pick up the phone so I can hear, and I'm going to keep myself on mute on here because of the echo.
Yeah, I think you can ask questions there because I muted, so we will not have.
Okay.
He answered a lot of my questions.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I know the Peace Corps has hired planners in the past, and we've had at least one graduate do that. Does APA have any involvement with that, or how might you advise students who might be interested?
Not official involvement. We've had, I run into Peace Corps people all the time, either former Peace Corps students working now in different areas, but we haven't really had. That's an idea that maybe I can put on our agenda if we could have a more regular relationship with them. But we haven't. There are a lot of them out there, and the program's still going on. At least knock on wood for the time being. So it's a good idea, but they have. I think that one of the bright spots, I've had USAID on the other hand is, I don't think, quite as successful. And one of the reasons that I say that is because they haven't had much of a strategy. It's been kind of like what I characterize as random good deeds. Not that they're bad, but they're not really strategic. So we end up having a clinic here, a new well, an agricultural cooperative, or whole kind of, like I said, random stuff. And unless you tie it into what I've discovered, that unless you tie in technical assistance to a local organization or governance structure that will support it afterwards, it probably won't last very long. So anyway, but we have reached out and received grants from the State Department, but I like the idea of something more formal with the Peace Corps. So, yeah. Other questions?
One question I had, I know you mentioned a few different consulting firms and nonprofits to look into. I think everybody here, we either graduate in December or this coming May. Is there like a comprehensive list on APA's website or somewhere that has a large list of people who work internationally to kind of help guide our searches?
Yeah. What I would say is right now, no, there isn't one that basically is focused only on international, but a good place to start is the business card section of Planning Magazine. In the back, there are these business card type advertisements that for the consultants. You can see a lot like that. And then also, might think about if you have, if you don't go right into a job, what a lot of people do is see if they can get an internship or a fellowship with a company. The economy's picking up, but in the last couple of years it was a little bleak out there. So what I found was a lot of students were being creative about finding opportunities that then would morph into either a full-time job or at least a part-time paying job by volunteering. I can tell you that if you look at probably a way of getting at the answer to that question about the international organizations is to follow some of the links on the Road to Habitat 3 website and look at the World Urban Campaign, which is basically the NGOs that are advising UN Habitat on this whole Habitat 3 thing. And that would be a good surrogate for the question that you asked us. Most of the organizations that are participating in the World Urban Campaign are allies of APA, but it would give you probably 30 NGOs to look at, in addition to looking at the private sector folks that are in our Flying magazine. So that would be my recommendation.
And you had mentioned
Kansas also has, there might be a connection to some of the firms that exist in the metro areas nearby. I know I was just out in Omaha for an Urban Thinkers campus, which was one of two that the United States participated, or the United States hosted. This one was focused on small cities, and Louis Berger, for instance, was founded in Omaha, for example. So there are quite a number of engineers. They started out as engineering companies, but a lot of them have branched out into planning in the Midwest, HOK, for example. So just a couple that come to my mind. But also come to because if you can't come to the conference, there's going to be a pretty robust job connection.
So you had mentioned
Come for pretty low rate if you volunteer. I don't know if the volunteer period is over or not, because I don't stay tuned to that as much as I should. But if you volunteer for a certain number of hours, you can reduce that down to I think 0 actually. But the guru on all of the stuff outside of international is Monica, and her program is also featured on the website. But her email is mgroh@planning.org. She likes it when I advertise for her.
so you had mentioned international consulting, nonprofits, and academia as ways to get in to the international planning field. What about the public sector? Is that an option?
Well, it's a little tricky. I haven't seen there's some places like really metropolitan areas like Shanghai or Beijing where there are in fact people from the United States or Canada or Japan or other countries actually working in the municipality, but there's I haven't seen a lot of willingness. Some of it's language issues, and some of it's just the nuances of local planning in Nairobi compared to Seattle or someplace that there's a certain skepticism about it. So that's why I usually see more people working in international nonprofits than I do actually at the municipal level. That's not saying that it doesn't happen. But there are places obviously where there's always been a lot of back and forth. Canada has a pretty permeable relationship with the U.S., and so there's a lot of people that have worked in the States that work in Canada and vice versa. And to some extent, Mexico. I've just started an exchange program with Monterrey, the Technical University of Monterrey, Mexico, So I think that's, Central America, especially if you've got some Spanish skills, there's quite a lot of relationship, not as much, of course, as Canada because of the language difference, but Caribbean, you see APA members working back and forth, and to a lesser extent in Brazil. Brazil has traditionally had a lot of kind of trade barriers, and that carried over into the hiring of people. But I'd say in the Western Hemisphere, there's some pretty good markets there. Not so much in China and when you get outside of the big metropolitan areas, but it's definitely going in that direction where you find people working. Like I'm doing a little project with the Saudi government on a plan review, and that planning process is very international. The members of the planning team include Brits, Americans, Dutch, a couple of Chinese. So but that's through the Parsons, not the Parsons Breakerhoff, but just Parsons. They were founded in San Diego, so I keep the two straight. Parsons Breakerhoff was founded in, I think it was founded in Kansas City actually, but Parsons was founded in San Diego. So they're an example of this kind of multinational firm. But there are also at the local level in Saudi Arabia, American and British trained planners, largely because the Saudis don't have a very large stock of locally grown planning experts yet, so they're trying to develop that. Yeah.
Do you still have time to answer our question? Because it's already 1 hour, right?
Oh yeah, I have lots of time.
Oh yeah. Have you had like experience working on planning projects in Southeast Asia?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A few, but we haven't been able to get a long-term relationship like we have with China. I've had probably the place that we've had the most exchanges with is Vietnam. We've had a number of government officials, planners, people come over, but not on a regular basis. They come sporadically, and they also have sent delegations to our conference. And usually, if I find out if a group, we always have a lot of people from China coming, but Vietnam probably the second largest number over the years. And then I'm trying to develop a relationship right now with Indonesia, because the government of Indonesia now is more open to collaboration than has been in the past. And they obviously have a lot of the same kind of issues that we've been talking about, whether it's in terms of disaster. I mean, in Indonesia, you have every kind of disaster you could possibly anticipate: volcanoes, tidal waves, forest fires, earthquakes, whatever. But there's been more of a willingness, I think, with the Indonesian government lately. So we're trying to develop that along with the Philippines. I've got a nascent connection with the Philippine government right now that they want to develop a training program on cultural heritage, planning for some of the rural traditional villages as a model. So we haven't quite got the details down, but we're talking,
Yeah.
and I think it's going to probably.
Yeah, I have another question because I'm gonna be done in December. I'm going to graduate this December. I have 3 great professors here and like awesome classmates here, and I'm going back home, East Timor, and there it's like we are still struggling to do like planning projects, and I feel like I'm really grateful because you're here and you're expanding your knowledge about international networks or planning, and I'm interested to know how we can access to those like consulting or planning consultant services that you have in your office, and how we can access that to like sending people to, upgrade their skills in planning, and probably like, applying some consultants that have a very good, technical skills that we can, invite them or hire them to come to my country, for example, to give us, technical assistance for planning projects back home. Because in my country, people, we have like, call it like advisors, means like some people just get them nowhere and they don't have like planning, backgrounds well, and they come and they do something else that we want. So yeah, I'm interested to know how we can access the resources that you have.
Yeah, well,
as you mentioned.
Basically we can talk if you want to have a conversation with someone in East Timor ahead of your return about setting up. It could be as much as just getting good conversations started with you as the go-between lead, and then I can send Gail kind of like a two to three page outline of the kinds of examples of things that we have done with other countries in general, which can serve as a starting point to have a conversation with a local official or a national ministry, so that they can see, well, maybe an exchange, maybe technical assistance or whatever it is. So I'll follow up with Gail to share a little brief description of what kind of services APA does with international programs, and then you can be the liaison. Because it is an area of the world that we're, we have some presence in, obviously with our work in China, but we're keen to work in other countries in Southeast Asia that are all growing.
Thank you.
Other questions?
No. If I have questions, I can email you. Now you're very accessible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm really excited about being able to have this discussion because number one, it's the first time that we've had a relationship with Kansas in this respect. So let's do it again. And then the second thing is, I think we can maybe organize other programs with some of our other directors. So we have some talented people on staff, and I know they all love to participate in this kind of thing, whether it's research or getting Monica to talk more about the Young Professionals Program, what have you. So let's keep the dialogue going.
Thank you. I hope next time when we have webinar, we will not have technical problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Kayla, for setting it all up for us.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
What's the yes?
So which one do you think?